Yeah. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Khanna. I must agree that you are a maverick. That in such difficult times, you can get everybody on board and pull out such an excellent show. So without much ado, I'll just move forward. So good access really matters, as we have seen that patients who suffer from end stage renal disease, they have multiple comorbidities, and the last thing they want is the multiple punctures poking them and for having a painful dialysis. So a good AV access is boon for these patients, and maintaining that is a challenge, but if we follow certain guidelines and certain principles, then definitely we can maintain a good AV access in these patients. It's very important to understand that when we create an AV access, it is just not a surgical anastomosis which we are talking about. We have to think it as a continuous circuit, which means there are three primary important components. We have to have a good heart, because we have to have a good ejection fraction. If people are in cardiac failure, their fistulas don't mature. The veins starting from the fistula draining back into the heart, as Dr. Srinivas had shown us in the previous presentation. Central venous obstruction is very important, because if it exists because of underlying catheters, then definitely fistulas will fail and people will have venous hypertension. And simultaneously, there is development of venous stenosis because of multiple factors, which we will see during our presentation. So just to share some similar sort of a picture when we talk about central venous obstruction, so these patients will have all this sort of swelling. But if we keep a quick check on certain, I would say, clinical parameters, we can immediately pick up these patients who are developing central venous obstruction, and which is an arm swelling, increased venous pressure, increased back bleed, difficulty in cannulating. And obviously, these patients will present with neck and face swelling, which is an SFPC syndrome, or if they have a central venous catheter, which can develop a malfunctioning in that catheter. And sometimes even it's just a difficulty in placing a central venous catheter because of the central venous occlusion in these patients. So this is just a CT reconstructed image to show that excess is lifeline, and excess, these lifelines sometimes create havoc, because they are the major culprit in creating these central venous obstruction. So I would say lines are the main reasons to end up with central venous obstruction. And these cases you have seen when people, they have central venous obstruction, you balloon dilate, you put a stent, and then you get away. So what we have done is we have moved on, I would say, to dedicated venous stent in this area, rather than using wall stent, or we do use cover stent sometime in these areas. But over past few years, we have started using the dedicated venous stents. Again, this is, I would say, off the label use for these stents, because primarily they are meant to be used in the iliac territory, but we do use them for central venous. And if you could see that there is no migration, because this stent anatomy is such that these stents, they conform to the venous anatomy rather than forcing the veins to adapt to them. So that is why they do better, and definitely their patency is better. So these are some cases where patients swelling just disappear. And at this stage, I would like to mention about the future devices. If these patients, they have a central venous obstruction and you want to create an AV access, then you can opt for a Hero device, where you can endovascularly treat the central venous obstruction and stitch the graft onto the brachial artery. So you have a AV graft in a patient who has been suffering from central venous obstruction. So that's important. And now, when coming back to AV fistulas, the primary AV fistulas, which is considered as the best option for these patients for dialysis, but you must realize that patency rate at 1 year is only 60%, which means almost 40% patients will require some sort of an intervention to keep these fistulas patent for them. And the main reason for them to fail is intimal hyperplasia. And you must understand the justa anastomosis stenosis is the common site where these patients, they develop the stenosis. They do develop stenosis at the puncture site also, but there are certain, I would say, theories behind why these patients, they develop juxta anastomosis stenosis. One is that injury to the vein when we dissect during mobilization. Sometimes inadvertently we dissect the adventitia and cause the damage to the vein, and there could be a torsion of the swing vein which is brought unmobilized and brought close to the artery for an anastomosis. Then wall shear stress play a very important role. What happens is the turbulence of these shear stress around the anastomosis creates neointimal hyperplasia, because there is no linear shear stress acting in these places. There is a lot of flow turbulence in this area, and the geometry of the anastomosis plays a very important role. So here what you can see is, if there is a significant acute angle at the geometry, at the anastomosis, so the geometry is basically an acute angle, and what the acute angle does is that it hampers the flow, and these patients, they develop a stenosis. So when we talk about doing a fistuloplasty, it's very important to understand, though all of us who are capable of handling endovascular procedures, we can easily perform once our guide wires are across the stenosis. And trust me, passing guide wires across these stenotic segment is not difficult, or it's not very challenging, because most of the time you pick up these stenosis well in advance because of a good surveillance program. And occasionally you have to recanalize sometimes a totally occluded fistulas. So most of the times you will have a stenotic fistulas. But the important part is patient positioning, planning your access. Where do you want to puncture to gain access? Because you do want good arterial shoots, because you want to see how the veins are filling. And believe me, because we have to use non-compliant large balloons, so we do not want to go through the arteries, because these arteries are calcified. We don't want to poke 6 or 7 French sheets in these arteries. So we have to use the veins. Now sometimes the problem becomes that certain cath labs, they have fixed tables, they have fixed machines. So sometimes the monitor is on your back. So all those things have to be planned well in advance when you have to do this. Vein mapping for planning access is very important, because as I told you that you don't want to, if there is a short segment of vein which has to be used for cannulation, you don't want to puncture that segment, because in case you cause some thrombosis because of your puncture, you don't want to spoil that segment. So I would say majority of these cases, the main important thing is planning your access. From where do you want to enter? If there are some accessory veins, it's very good to enter. So these are some case examples of fistuloplasty where you see, once you plan, once your wires are across, you can pass your non-compliant balloons. Only thing what you require to understand is you require balloons like Atlas, like Conquest, which are high pressure balloons. Sometimes you need to go up to 30 millimeters of mercury in these cases, because these are thick fibrous tissues with thick fibrous band which you have to break. So these are some of the cases where you can go across the anastomosis, you can have the balloon, you can dilate the balloon. Very difficult, very, I would say, and these procedure, when you do balloon dilatation, patient, they experience extreme pain also. So that also is, I would say, a parameter the patient tells you. The moment they are not able to tolerate the pain, then you can imagine that's the upper limit, because you can't go beyond that, because then you can cause a rupture. And with the help of some thrombolytic agents, if there is an concomitant thrombosis in the fistula, and just putting a cannula, giving a thrombolytic agent for a while, then taking up these patients for fistuloplasties, you can salvage almost totally occluded fistulas. Just to give you a case example, you can see, and on table you can use the duplex to help you. So you can see a pulsatile fistula, and there is a significant pre-stenotic dilatation in this patient. And when you put your color box on, you see significant aliasing of color, because there is a very tight critical stenosis there. The balloon, you can see, has a significant waist. This is a Conquest balloon. So sometimes you have to go to 20, 22, 24 millimeters of pressure to break these tight bands. And once you break these tight bands, you get a good result. And you can see on table, you can see that these fistulas, they do very well. And there are some colleagues of mine who they even they advocate that we should cause intentional rupture of these veins with high pressure balloons to cause remodeling. And we do see sometimes inadvertent ruptures, but if you keep your balloons inflated in these areas, when there are ruptures, they automatically heal. And this we were talking about initially, the ideal geometry, because if you have an acute angle, then what you have is a turbulent flow separation, I would say turbulent shear forces, which do not cause vein dilatation. Instead, they cause significant neointimal hyperplasia and cause stenosis at the anastomosis. So this acute angulation is not a good thing to have. What we should plan is a smooth curve, a nice curve along the anastomosis, so that we get linear shear forces which help in dilatation. So you can see there what we are having is a failing radiocephalic fistula. So how we have improvised over last few, I would say, months, that we have taken lead from some of our colleagues from Australia, especially in Sydney. What they have started doing is they have started using Supera stent across the anastomosis in radiocephalic fistulas. And this really does well. Now we have close to around 25 patients on surveillance, and this really does well. You can see another patient where we have placed Supera around the radiocephalic anastomosis, and it really does well. So there are certain devices also available for similar purpose. This is a vascular device, which is a nitinol external support device. What it does, it comes in different diameters, because whatever you can choose according to the diameter of the vein. And this, once we do a conventional anastomosis, and it's very easy to use. Once you measure what is your arterial size, and then you choose the device, it goes around your vein. Once you have completed the anastomosis, it's very easy to just go around with the suture you tied. And what it does, it maintains a smooth curve along the anastomosis. So that's what we have been achieving with the Supera post-operatively. So this can be done. Mild expensive. Recently, the trial in the US for recruitment for this device is over. So let's hope it gives us some promising results. And something about the AV graft salvage also, because what we see is AV grafts are very notorious to develop stenosis around the venous anastomosis. So what we have been doing, we have been very aggressive in stenting these patients using a fluency stent graft. If there is a significant stenosis around the venous anastomosis, so we can use. And now there is there is level 1A evidence available for using fluency stent grafts for venous anastomosis stenosis in AV grafts. And now when we do see sometime acute occlusion of AV graft, now we do have the option of mechanical thrombectomy devices in the form of angiojet and penumbra. And we have been very aggressive in using these because anybody, a surgeon, will realize that doing a surgical thrombectomy in these patients used to be a nightmare. It used to be very messy. But if you can get away with a percutaneous approach, it's really a great thing. So what you see is this was a patient who had a previously placed fluency at the venous anastomosis. Because of the extensive pressure post dialysis, the graft got thrombosed. And what we did, we placed a cannula before, give some thrombolytic agent, then used angiojet. And on table, you can establish the flow and you don't lose anything. And you on a Doppler, you can confirm good flow established. And the best part is you can send these patients back for dialysis immediately post-procedure. This is penumbra being used for salvaging fistula. Now, all of us who have been dealing with the stenosis for salvage of AV fistulas, they will agree with me that cephalic arch stenosis really is a challenge, because the anatomy in this area is such that when the vein pierces and enters the subclavian vein, that is a very difficult area to deal with, because it's a very resistant and refractory to balloon dilatation. So we have been using drug-coated balloons in this area. Moreover, any patients coming very quickly to us with recurrent stenosis, we have been using drug-coated balloons also. So they do give us a benefit of, I would say, 5 to 6 months. Some literature, some authors have claimed to get a benefit of 18 months. Somehow we have not been able to replicate. Maximum benefit we have got over a conventional balloon is for maximum of 6 months using this. And this is the another area, cephalic arch, where we have used Supera stent. And this is another area which it really does very well. Only limitation is the maximum diameter available for a Supera stent is 7.5. So we can't go beyond that. And sometimes you need to dilate, or the vein size is bigger than that. Because of the stenosis, the vein dilates. And if it's more than 7.5, then you can't use this. And I'm glad to say that we were the first one in India to start duplex guided fistuloplasty for these patients, especially for those group of patients who come repeatedly to you and you are absolutely sure they don't have a central venous obstruction because of their previous venogram. And mostly these procedures are done in a hybrid lab, where the facility for a C-arm or a fluoroscopy is available, but you can still complete these procedures under ultrasound guidance easily. And in case if you have doubt, then you can always take a completion venogram to just see whether we have achieved a good results. But otherwise, for peripheral lesions, a good ultrasound knowledge is sufficient to carry out these procedure. And we do require, because we are surgeons, so we do require sometimes surgical salvage. If we are not able to salvage native fistulas, then sometimes we improvise and we do basilic vein transpositions for these patients. You can see, and the way sometimes there are aneurysmal dilatation which cannot be dealt with endovascular measures, so you need surgical repair for these patients. Infected grafts, excoriation, all these things. So a surgical backup is also very necessary. Aneurysmal dilatation, so what you do is you excise the aneurysm, repair the artery with a vein patch, and keep the fistula going. And with the advent of hybrid labs, a hybrid procedure, this was just we did few days back. This patient had an occluded fistula with a small leak. We evacuated the thrombus, and then this totally occluded fistula, balloon dilated it. Again, the cephalic arch stenosis was there. And what we did, again, a Supera in this patient. And this patient was immediately sent for dialysis post-procedure, because everything was working fine once you do these patients well. And this is our data over last, I would say, 5 years. And now we have come to a stage there where we are practically doing one fistula salvage a day. And when we started, we did only 50 to 60 in a year. And so the future, I would say, is computer-assisted surgical planning, which could allow optimization of AVF geometry with the aim to reduce blood flow velocity oscillation and flow instability, which causes neointimal hyperplasia. So something I'm very passionate about these patients and salvaging fistula. So we run a lot of programs regularly, because unless until we have awareness regarding this, it's very difficult. So these are the certain programs where we teach the technicians how to clinically pick up if the fistula is malfunctioning, teach a lot of youngsters how to make a proper fistula, because we do have a lot of deficiency in properly trained people who can make these fistulas. And we do have the assistance from Johnson & Johnson. They provide us with a mobile van, which we can travel to various medical colleges and run these anastomosis courses to teach general surgeons and plastic surgeons who are keen to take up and help these patients to make these fistulas. And for now, almost last 5 years, we are running this conference called Controversy in Dialysis Access, where on one platform, we have the cardiologists, radiologists, nephrologists, surgeons. Everybody comes in with one purpose: to help these patients, because this, we know, it's a very morbid disease. Patients are very much in pain. We do have representation from all other countries. And before even COVID crisis, online, we have been taking initiative and participating with all the dialysis access meeting across the globe, and ultrasound program with the help of Asian Society of Vascular Surgery, especially for dialysis access and how to pick up the stenosis. They've been running for last few years. And so this year, what we started doing live endovascular therapies. So over 2.5 days, we did more than 16 cases to show. And in the wet lab training, we had a lot of nephrologists as well as some intervention radiologists who wanted to learn some basic skills regarding anastomosis, because there are areas where they don't have a surgical backup. So thank you so much. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions if there are any questions.
So, thank you very much, Tarun. Again, a great presentation. You do tremendous work. We've been following your work right from Gangaram days. And we will probably take questions if there are any after we hear from Dr. Bharat Sachdeva, who is coming from US. He specializes in interventional radiology. Incidentally, he works in the Shane Oshner group. I think at Shreveport. I used to be at New Orleans at Oshner Medical Foundation. And it reminds me of my previous days in New Orleans and in Oshner. So over to you, and he's going to be talking of something very recent and something which is very pertinent. He's creating this AV fistulas percutaneously. And he's the clinical associate professor of medicine, program director of nephrology fellowship, and director of interventional nephrology. So, and we've been hearing him in our meeting, which we do jointly with the Interventional Nephrology Society, which is Avatar. Actually, Avatar started along with maybe at the third or fourth of our meeting, they started doing a co-meeting with us, and we are matured to be a big meeting, and we are doing meetings together every year, which is Avatar with Africa. So we also run this interventional nephrology courses about 4 times a year in Apollo, and probably for the last 3 months we've not been able to do it because of the COVID pandemic. So Welcome, Dr. Bharat. And we would be very eager to actually know this technique of heavy fistula creation percutaneously.